Welcome to Minis and Motorbikes.
Today we met a guy who turned professional at the age of 22 in 1976, winning the ACU solo title in the British Motorcycle Championship. He was a teammate to Barry Sheene on a Suzuki in the 1977 500cc World Championship, finishing 5th overall. He returned to become the 1978 500cc ACU Gold Star champion. He also won the Shell 500 title in both 1979 and 1980, and a British Superbike title in 1981. Today, Adam was lucky enough to meet this guy.
Yeah, it's not very often that a boy gets to meet his heroes, a true legend and a true gentleman.
No, he's not answering, is he? Oh, I'll have to go in and see where he is. Hang on.
What? Come on, mate. What are you doing still in bed? What are you doing in bed? We got to go off and film. We got an interview to do.
Oh, what are you doing?
Well, come on, mate. We got an interview to do.
Coffee.
Yeah, well, I'll get you some coffee. Come
Turn
on.
the lights out.
Come
Coffee.
Come on, get
Get out.
yourself up, mate. Come on.
Turn the lights out.
Right, let's go. Right, Steve, is there any chance we could go in and see some of your bikes?
Well, we're better than stood out
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Pouring the rain, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah. We do get some strange people about here, though.
Very strange. Well, I'm sort of a little bit in awe because it's the trucks, the bikes, it's a bit too much for me to take in. But if you'd like to sort of tell us about some of your bikes and history of them,
Yeah, I guess so.
best results,
I mean,
worst results.
this is 77. This was the bike that I rode in 1977. But
Yeah.
obviously, I'd started a way bit before that, club racing.
Yeah.
Pretty much Snetterton was my local track, living out here in Hertfordshire.
Right.
And so, like everyone else, I mucked around, scraping money together. I was doing an apprenticeship actually as an agricultural engineer, which sounds better than a tractor mechanic, which I was. Really didn't have a lot of money, but a bunch of mates at a pub in a place called Harston, just up the road here, we decided we fancied a bit of racing because we were always riding our bikes around the roads.
Yeah.
Then I got a bit of sponsorship from a fellow called Harold Coppop, who was a lovely chicken farmer from Oxfordshire, which got me a Yamaha. Then I started winning quite a few races again in amateur level, then national level, and then I got a sponsor called Dave Moore that bought me a bike very similar to this actually, a Mark 1 Suzuki. And I started really doing well in national races, beating some of my heroes, and probably like you had heroes back then, and it was Paul Smart and Dave Croxford and Percy Tate and people like that. Barry Sheene was obviously my big hero.
Yeah.
And with the Dave Moore sponsored RG 500, I started beating some of those guys. And then I got to know Barry Sheene quite well because he was living at Wisbeach at the time. Hooked up with him. And luckily for me, that season in 76, I beat John Williams, John Newbold, had a few battles with Barry Sheene, and Barry put me forward to join him for 1977, which worked, and I did, and I got a bike very similar to this, and this is it, Texaco Heron sort of Suzuki.
Yeah, because that's when I first sort of heard about
Yeah.
you, and Barry was in the 77.
Yeah, and it was a flipping eye-opener for me, because I'd never been abroad, ever, but that's not true. I'd been to France on the ferry, but 77, the first round of the championship was in Venezuela. So I'm off to Venezuela, which I didn't know where it was or anything, on a big aeroplane going down to South America, riding alongside my hero Barry Sheene. So it was all a bit of an eye-opener for me. Talk about wet behind the ears. Anyway, the season went pretty good. And these were great bikes. The Square 4, little bit finicky, you know, they weren't hugely reliable, but they were good enough, I guess you could say. And anyway, the season went okay-ish. I had a couple of crashes, obviously. Didn't know any of the tracks because it was my first time doing Grand Prix, but I finished up 5th in the championship. Barry won it again, the second time. He'd won it in 76, then again in 77. But unfortunately for me, at the end of 77, Suzuki's budget got cut from Japan, and they basically fired me. But I was kind of, didn't mind. I was having a good year, and it all changed dramatically in that Barry Sheene, who had introduced me to lots of very famous people that year, and I'd got to know, and he knew quite well, George Harrison.
Ah.
So there I am, like mixing with George Harrison and everything else like that.
Yeah.
And George said, "Oh, don't worry, Stavros, I'll buy you a bike." And he did exactly that. He gave me about, I don't know, 30,000-40,000 pounds, which is a
Bloody
shitload
hell,
of
that was
money
a
back
lot
then.
of money then.
Which
Christ.
enabled me to go and buy some standard RG 500s. In fact, the Suzuki team helped me with parts
Oh,
and
right.
things.
Yeah.
And I went on in '78, winning some British championships and things, doing Grand Prix still. And then '79, back to Suzuki's, and so they re-employed me. And that was that was a dodgy year, '79, because there was three of us. Tom Heron, the Irish fellow, joined the team, and he got killed in the May that year at the Northwest 200, so it was a bit of a dodgy year. I broke my wrist and ankle at the first round in Venezuela, and didn't do so well, so I got fired again, but by now I'm getting quite used to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love RG500s. They're probably my favourite bike. I get to ride them quite a lot now.
Yeah.
In that there's a really lovely guy called Steve Wheatman that owns and runs the classic Suzuki team, and he's got a selection of bikes that I get to ride, and I can't believe how bad they are. By comparison, I mean, this was the ultimate Grand Prix winning machine, and now you ride them and the brakes are rubbish, and they're tiny. You forget how small they all are, and they only have, I say only, about 120 brake horsepower, which was a lot then.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you know, like a flipping 600 road bike has got more, so they don't feel ridiculously fast. They feel light because they're only 120 kilos, I think, so pretty light bikes, but just don't seem really powerful. But they're still probably my favourite bike, just because I probably had as much success on them as anything else. So and it's nice to keep
a
them.
pair of shoes on, you see, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. They're comfortable and they fit, and they were. But you see, I think. I say 120 horsepower. In '77 we were driving around, or you weren't, because you were too young, in Ford Anglias and Ford Cortinas that wouldn't pull the cock off a chocolate mouse. So they were pretty good, and the road bike of its time, what would it be? Bonneville or something that had 50 horsepower. So you know, when you think about it, it was pretty powerful. Yeah. By comparison, it was pretty powerful. But anyway, so I've got a lot to thank my old mates from the pub where we kind of got together, my sponsors Harold Coppock and Dave Moore, and people that elevated me into where I am now, which is 45 years without a proper job. When I first started racing trucks, which is another part of my life, the first ever, when it started getting quite serious, they used to put the trucks on a rolling road and check the horsepower, and there was three categories, and I think it was 350 horsepower, 400 and 500 or something like that, and they put them on a rolling road. Well, the truck I was driving, I think it was the 350 horsepower, something like that. But when I got onto the main straight, if I turned a radio on, it gave another 100 horsepower with a big fuel burst.
Oh, superb! Yeah.
So there was lots and lots of cheating going on.
Yeah.
Right, leathers. Do you know I haven't got any of my really old leathers because
such a shame.
I know I wished I had, but you have to remember back when I was racing this year, I had one pair of leathers, maybe two if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And you patched them up and this, that, and the other. So I never kept any of them, and they weren't a lot of use. I mean, you might as well have been wearing pyjamas because they didn't have any of the protective clothing. So pretty much the leathers I've got here. There was one set I remember. That went with a bike that I sold some many years ago. So this is all pretty much from when I started doing commentary for BBC. I'd be riding all the Grand Prix bikes.
Yeah, because I see the Charlie Cox footage with you, Donington, with the sidecar.
That's right. Yeah. He was bloody moaning like you can't believe.
He was crapping himself.
It was, yeah. He didn't like the fact he was going up in the air going around the corner. But the nice thing about like these leathers, BBC, I got to ride Ross's bike, all the Hondas, Nicky Hayden's, Kawasaki, you know, the whole lot, the Suzuki's, which was great fun because we'd go to a track and then they'd let me ride the Grand Prix bikes, which was always a bit kind of scary for me because I hadn't been racing for a while, but more importantly that was their factory bike that I could easily cartwheel through the barriers or something like that. So, and you used to get 3 laps, so never really got to rattle around. I actually did quite a few laps on Rossi's bike, would have been the 1000 Yamaha before they went to the 80s and stuff like that. So yeah, these are stuff that I've used for testing and everything else like that. Another set of BBC ones. And then Avon, I'm an ambassador for Avon tyres, so I have a set of Avon leathers here. Suzuki's, I did the what was it, endurance race, 6-hour endurance race at Donington Park, 4 or 6 hours, can't remember
Yeah,
what it
I've done some miles
was. So
at
these
that.
leathers were made for that. And the interesting thing about this set of leathers is they barely got used because Jamie Whittam, who was my teammate, crashed lap on lap 1.
Yeah.
So I was sitting around with all the gear, no idea, because we've got nowhere to go. Set
I remember that.
of replica Texaco Heron Suzuki leathers, which obviously work with
for
these
that one,
bikes
yeah.
here. And my newest set there, which haven't been used a lot this year because frankly we haven't been going anywhere. Actually, I did use them. I did get to do a couple of classic races down in South Africa this year. So Steve Wheatman sent a bike down for that.
Oh, lovely.
So a whole set of stuff there, but none of them really from that period time. But,
That's fine.
but the leathers back then were so bad, honest to goodness.
Paper thin as well, weren't
With
they?
the gloves, you might as well have been wearing golf gloves. The
Yeah.
boots were just like Wellingtons. Nothing really protected you a great deal. So.
Helmets weren't that good either, were they?
No.
Helmet technology's moved on.
Now, I reckon if I'd have had a set of leathers like these back when I was racing, I'd have been faster because it wouldn't have hurt so much.
Yeah.
I was always allergic
Yeah.
to pain, so that didn't work.
Yeah, so apparently you qualified for Sheene at one point and
Yeah.
did a better time for him than you did yourself.
Well, that's exactly right, and that would have been obviously in a bike very similar to this one, and it was at Mallory Park. And
Yeah.
the story goes, and it's the reason the story goes, and it's wrong. It's James Whittam. I blame him because some years back they started doing a road show, the Foggy and Wit show, or Wit and Foggy and Wit, I think
I
it was
remember
called.
that, yeah.
And they were going around doing all these stories about racing, and it used to be quite funny because James, I'd see him a lot at the motorcycle show, at the NEC show, and Whit would be going, "Oh," he says, "bloody hell," in his lovely northern accent. Foggy and I were doing a show up
was
in
he
Blackburn.
northern?
He is very northern. Huddersfield, I think you'll find.
Huddersfield.
And we were doing a show, and we ran out of things to talk about with half an hour to go, so we had to use all your stories.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why the Mad Tour came about.
Oh,
'Cause
right.
Whit was
Yeah.
telling me, him and Foggy were going around and telling everyone all my stories,
And
but
they
they were
were
telling them wrong. And the Whittam story about this was at Mallory Park, where Barry Sheene turned up drunk one day and couldn't go out, but it wasn't the case. He turned up at a race at Mallory and his knee had clicked, a screw had come loose in his knee.
Yeah.
And he'd done a free practice session, went to get off the bike, and his knee jammed up. So Franco had to whisk him off under a blanket out of Mallory Park to a chiropractor to have him fixed up, try and get the screw back in or get the ligament around it.
Yeah.
And he couldn't be there, so Rex White, the team manager, said, "Any chance," and it's a big thing to us, "would you mind dressing up as Barry Sheene and going on his bike?" A bit like you being here, actually. I couldn't get in his leathers quick enough, so I shot off on the number 7 bike and wearing his helmet, his leathers, his gloves, his boots, the whole lot, and went out and only did 3 or 4 laps just to get some heat in the tyres, go around and literally allow him to qualify, and he didn't care where he'd qualified, but it meant he could start the race. Came in, and the interesting thing, when I'm riding with a Barry Sheene helmet on a dark visor, all the girls were having their underwear up, which they had no idea it was the bloke with a big nose and big ears, and it was me. Anyway, I came in, jumped on my bike and did probably 10 laps, changed the gear in this, that and the other, and then when the timesheets came out and Barry came back, we went and had a look, and sure enough, number 7 was on the front row and number 6 on the second row. The silly knobhead I am, I went faster on his bike. It must have been the underwear being waved at me.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, just the thrill of it, the thrill of the chase.
I think so, or the fact that the number 7 made me faster, or maybe his bike was better than mine.
His bike had a little tweak, but yours didn't.
No. So yeah, I did qualify for him. I don't think that would happen these days. I can't imagine Johan Mir qualifying for Alex Rins at the Grand Prix this weekend, can you? Those sort of things don't really go on anymore.
Right, Steve. What about the Loctite team? This is very interesting.
It kind of came about in I quit racing 1986 was my last year racing properly. By then I'd stopped doing Grand Prix and was doing British Championships, and kind of a main focus for me towards the end, I guess, was the Super Stock Series, because I rode for Yamaha and they were pretty interested in the FZ 750 when it came out. Like I say, I've got one of those in the other shed, and it was a pretty reasonably competitive bike, and that was racing up against the cheating Mick Grant, and there was people like Mark Sal, Keith Hewin, Trevor Nation, Kenny Irons, all those guys were doing super stocks, and it was probably the premier class in the UK at the time, because I think that's where the sales were for the bikes. Everyone was keen on promoting them. Anyway, I decided at the end of '86 that I was going to retire. I was fed up with waking up in different hospitals, wondering who I was, and broken bones and this, that and the other. So, and I was getting a bit old, and I was about to start a family. I'd got married, worst thing I ever did probably. Anyway, and so I thought, right, I'll run a team. And my sponsors at the time, Loctite, who supported me when I was racing, were very keen to carry on because they were getting good promotions from it. And it worked really well. Loctite racing worked really good. So I ended up running the team, simple as that. But I intended, because my last year of racing, I had Kenny Irons from Luton, who was riding beside me, as sort of semi-supported by the team that I was in, the Loctite Yamaha team. And I was desperately keen for him to carry on in '87 riding for me. Yeah. But unfortunately, Suzuki's came along and offered a lot more money than the budget enabled us to have. So I lost Kenny and he went off to ride for Suzuki's. And so I had to find another rider to sort of come and join the team. We signed Keith Ewan up, and when Kenny didn't join us, we ended up having Trevor Nation. So it was Keith Ewan and Trevor Nation for the first year in 1987. Which went pretty good. Keith Ewan ended up winning the Super Stock Championship for the Loctite Yamaha team. And that there, I mean, you can't actually see it, but it's up here, but I'm sure we'll get a cutaway of that later on, with Keith Ewan and Trevor Nation up there. And Keith won the championship. Then I had to let Trevor go because he did nothing but moan. I'll get on alright with him now, but he used to moan about his Yamaha because he wanted it more like his Suzuki that he was used to riding. And I ended up getting a guy called Mark Phillips riding for me, and he stayed with Keith Ewan for a while. And then we had a real breakthrough. Keith retired and ended up getting Terry Reimer. There he is, young Terence here. And he was probably the best rider I had in the team. And was a great rider, great guy, good mate of mine now. We still hang out together a lot.
He drove, I think he drove one of the Harlow Motorsport Porsches.
He did a bit of car racing actually. In fact, I've known Terry since I got to know him here, and he was a great rider. And then I ended up, believe it or not, a second generation when I started racing trucks. And then when I finished racing trucks, which would have been 2001, my team carried on, not with Mercedes, with an MA, and I put Terry got to drive that as well. But I know he did drive some Porsches very well, but it cost him a lot of money, which no car racing can do, I know. But anyway, once Terry joined the team, we really started stepping up a pace. He was winning world championships, superbike races, won a couple of British championships. And then Rob McElnay hooked up, and we got him signed up as well. So Terry and Rob, there's no doubt that that was the premier British team at the time in that sort of period.
Yeah, because they were on it,
and you know, hugely successful really in those early 90s. So that was good fun. I didn't enjoy it as much as riding for obvious reasons. I didn't miss the going to hospital bit, but probably missed the accolades that you get when you're riding. And if you're a team manager, it's great if you're winning and you're an idiot if you're losing and that type of thing. But that also had to come to an end because at the end of 91 I got a kind of an ultimatum from Mercedes-Benz, who I was doing part-time truck racing with them, and they came along with a budget that I couldn't refuse, or a salary that I couldn't refuse. And I kind of had to weigh up because the team was running extremely well, but I knew that age was creeping up, and I was only able to race for a certain, you can't be too old, can you? So I took the option of racing trucks, handed the team over to Rob McElnay, who was about to retire from racing, and he carried it on with Loctite, with the sponsorship and with Yamaha. And it even spent a bigger budget than I was able to do. So. And then, truck racing happened from 91 through to 2001, me driving professionally for Mercedes and mainly for BP, they were the big sponsors and everything else like that. But kept very much an eye on motorcycle racing and still carried on doing some commentary work. So I was kind of dovetailing some of the truck racing with doing commentary work for BBC, British Superbikes and stuff like that. And then, I'm kind of jumping along here, after the truck racing career sort of came to an end, which was, timing was perfect, 2001, I then got a bit of an ultimatum from BBC, did I want to go full-time commentary work? So, and I did. So it took about, it was Barry Sheene that said Steve Parrish, if he fell in a cesspit, he'd come up with a salmon on his head. And he's probably right. And I've worked on the assumption, and when one door shuts, another one opens, but you've got to keep the corridor short. That's the answer. And it did. So then BBC commentary work happened, covering initially World Superbikes and then moving on to Grand Prix with our mate Charlie Cox that used to race with, Susie Perry, and then first year actually with an Australian guy called Lee Diffie, who now works for NBC in America. And over the years, Matt Roberts, Gavin, all those guys and everything else, and that was, really good fun, until tragically, and I say tragically because it is for motorcycle racing, BBC couldn't meet the budgets that BT came up with, so it would have been 2013 I think it was, and tragically why I say that is because the viewing figures are about 10% what they used to be. It used to be up to 2 million for BBC, and it's 200,000-ish with BT now. So
It's
a bit of a shame for the sport, and a lot of people don't get to see motorcycle racing as they used to.
Yeah.
So,
Right, Steve, what about this little beauty?
yeah, good story. Well, I say good story, weird story, in the fact that I've no idea why I've got it, but I was happened to be at an auction at Duxford on a viewing day, and wandering around there. I think it was an H&H auction. A mate of mine called George Beale was involved with it all, and I'm wandering around there just naturally, and I go, oh, I fancy an old sort of Wallace and Gromit sidecar, which is very much what this is, or George or Mildred, whichever one you want to think of. And I just mentioned that, yeah, it'd be a bit of a giggle. Anyway, I'm playing golf one day in a charity golf match the next day, and I get this phone call from George Beale saying, you bought that sidecar. I wasn't really after buying it, but anyway. And I did, I can't remember what I paid for, quite a lot of money actually, probably $3,000 or something, I don't know, $3,500.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went and picked it up, and it was a pile of junk, and I hadn't really closely looked at it. But I got in touch with the Classic Motorcycle magazine. They were quite keen on me being involved in restoring it, and at the time I was probably working for BBC, and I hadn't got a lot of spare time. So there it is. It was something that I just ended up with, but I'm pleased I did, because it's been a lot of fun. On a sunny Sunday, it goes down the village pub with my missus in it or whatever. I've actually even had her mother in it. I've tried tipping her out, but I couldn't.
I bet you did as well, actually.
Yeah, I did. But it will go up on. It's easy to get the sidecar up in the air, and it chugs along quite nicely. So yeah, it's been a bit of fun actually, and I don't know, there's something good about sidecars, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're all bikers, but you go through a village on a motorbike, and you often get that kind of flipping bikers again, you know, don't like them, noisy part. Go past in a sidecar and everyone laughs and points and giggles and smiles. And so it does bring a smile to your face, and I think it is the Wallace and Gromit and George and Mildred kind of element about it. And you can get your cold beers in here, and away you go. Right. So yeah, it's all good.
So what's with the Bang & Olufsen?
Right, yeah. There is a bit. Well, there's quite a good story to this. This I've owned. Well, I have owned this since 1982. Right, Bang & Olufsen. It was a state-of-the-art stereo system, which apparently is still quite a valuable name and this and that. How I came about it was, you're going to bear with me here, and I hope the statute of limitations allows you to do things and you get away with it after so long. But Barry Sheene was living down at Charlwood near Gatwick, where he lived in the manor house. And his wife, Stephanie, had a housekeeper, a youngish girl, she was probably about 20, I guess, something like that worked for her. And her boyfriend was a bit of a scallywag in the fact that he borrowed money off of this girl, and I can't remember what her name was, I should remember it, but he borrowed about 500 quid off of her. And as soon as she gave him the money, he cleared off and she never saw him again. And Barry was incensed by this and not at all pleased, because this girl hadn't got that much money, and it was sort of her savings and everything. So I happened to go down there around there. I can't remember if it was 81 or 82. Anyway, I went down there one day and he said, right, Stavros, we've got a job on tonight. Okay, what would that be, Barry? He said, we're going to go and rob a house. And that's exactly what we did. I happened to have a Rolls Royce at the time. We got some black tape out, taped up the number plates, put balaclavas on and drove off. I'm not going to tell you where this house was. And we drove in there, crept around, and this girl who still knew the boyfriend, even though she'd been dumped, said he goes off to football or something on a Wednesday night, and on a Wednesday night we turned up, broke in and stole 500 quid worth of equipment. So ended up selling what it was, and this was one of the things, and there was a telly and a this, that and the other. And as it happened, I think I gave 200 quid into the kitty for this, and someone else bought the telly, and someone else bought something else, and we ended up giving the 500 quid back to this girl. So it's like Robin Hood, really, wasn't it? And I've still got it, so it's basically contraband. So there's and I want to get rid of it now. So if anyone wants something that's got a bit of history to it, Bang & Olufsen stereo, the Barry Sheene style. And if the police come round now,
I'll sign it as well. Actually, better not sign it.
I mean, apparently these tape record decks are quite valuable these days.
I'm anxious to see what mine was on.
Rod
Stewart.
Rod Stewart, yeah. I've met Rod Stewart, my other claim to fame. A good friend of mine, I went to a party at his, and there was a dinner party at Clifton Hall. Rod Stewart was there, and it was near Christmas time. We ended up standing in the hallway of Clifton Hall with a fire lit, singing Rod Stewart Christmas songs, when a message came out from the main dining room, would you keep the noise down outside? And I don't think people knew it was Rod Stewart actually singing it. It was just us bunch of idiots. So stolen stereo set, can be yours.
Oh, fantastic. So
again, I'm not sure if Valentino Rossi or Mark Marquez has ever done anything like that.
No,
so
it's
anyway,
probably tucked up in bed, weren't they? And,
almost certainly. But it's good fun driving around with stolen gear.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah.
So, and it does all work.
Yeah. Right, Steve. Thank you very much for letting this round. It's much appreciated.
A pleasure. You haven't had a bill yet.
Wow. Anyway, I just wondered if you sign us a picture, please. if
Yeah,
it's
it'd be
all
my
right,
absolute pleasure. No problem at all.
Got one?
Yeah. I've got it all printed out for you, mate. Here you go. Here, I'll get him to sign that though.
That's the wrong one.
What, you said Stavros?
No, that's not the. No, it's not the right
Listen.
one.
Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on, I've got it.
You employ it?
I've got it. Here you go.
No.
It's that one, isn't
No,
it?
you tonk. It's still not the right
What?
one. You prat.
Actually, that is more likely. Isn't it?
Looks like.
I was a fat little when I was young, honestly.
Hang on.
But that genuinely is where Stavros came from. Sheene saw me fat. and-
as a kid.
No, that's not me.
That's not it.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah, lovely.
Get him to sign
Thank you
that
very
one.
much.
Lovely.
Well, I'd like to show you.
Yeah. Sorry
Yeah.
about this social
No,
distancing and everything.
No,
But
thank you very much.
Do you know
It's
the
very
other
much
thing is interesting? Well, I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's keep away from it. Is that I get muddled up a lot with Steve Parrish, who runs Crystal Palace Football Club. I'm not into football at all, but I'm often getting emails. In fact, about one this week, moaning about the facilities and this, that, and the other. And I just say I use the director's box this week. So there must be all these people turning up there, knocking on the door, going, "Look, I've got an email from Steve Parrish." So I get muddled up. And in fact, I've even had BBC turn up once to interview me about me sacking the manager, and they've got the wrong Steve Parrish. There you go.
Well, colourful like you
But
feel.
that's definitely that has definitely been photoshopped, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's not your head, is it?
Because that looks a lot older than I do, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, lovely. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Much appreciated.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.